Greetings, innovators and leaders. This is AI for the C-Suite, your compass for navigating the exponential age. I'm your host, Chad Harvey, and we're here to bring you cutting-edge insights on AI tailored specifically for middle-market organizations. Buckle up as we embark on a journey through the transformative world of artificial intelligence. Today, I am delighted to welcome Egor Olteanu, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Volt AI, a mission-driven technology company that's using AI to fundamentally transform physical security. Igor's journey to Silicon Valley entrepreneurship is anything but conventional. After emigrating to the U.S. as a teen, he served overseas in the U.S. Army before being recruited into Google's legendary R&D division, known as Google X. There, he was a founding member of Project Loon, an ambitious initiative to provide internet connectivity to remote areas using high-altitude balloons, the kind of moonshot thinking that defines breakthrough innovation. But it was a tragic event in 2018, a shooting at YouTube's San Bruno headquarters, that catalyzed Igor's entrepreneurial mission. He recognized that while he understood the operational challenges of preventing such incidents, solving them required building an AI-powered product. Together with his co-founder Dmitry, a veteran engineer from Amazon, Apple, Uber, and Facebook, Igor launched Volt AI in 2019. Today, Volt's tech enables millions of security cameras to be monitored continuously with consistent accuracy, serving Fortune 500 companies, educational institutions, and industrial facilities. But Igor's vision extends beyond enterprise adoption. He's passionate about making complex AI systems so intuitive that anyone can use them without training, bringing enterprise-grade security within reach of middle-market organizations. Let's dive in. Igor, welcome to AI for the C-Suite. Same. So, I mentioned in the intro when we were describing your background, the catalyst for the founding of Volt, the 2018 YouTube shooting in San Bruno. I know that's a heavy subject, but as your origin story, and again, the catalyst or the driver for the founding of Volt, I'm interested. What specifically in that situation did you see operationally that you knew could be solved differently, and why did AI become your answer rather than a more traditional security approach?
What I can say is the following. We got very lucky that day because aside from the fact that San Bruno PD was there within 2 minutes, which is unheard of. So they were spot on, right? They did a fantastic job responding to that event. We also had a phenomenal security team. Everybody from our chief security officer to the people on the ground to the people managing that crisis were very well trained. We had phenomenal technology. We had great outsourced guards, right? So we had all the chess pieces, so to say, in order to try and minimize the damage and respond to it as quickly as possible. And still, as the investigation went on, what we realized that that lady was on the ground way longer than she should have been without being detected, right? And that's when, in the fog of it all, when I was talking to Dmitry afterwards and kind of brainstorming around what went wrong, all the technology in the world, all the money in the world, all the great people in the world, right? Very quick law enforcement response, very well trained law enforcement group. And still, right, something is missing. Something is not connecting the pieces end to end in order to try and prevent something like that from happening. And we totally understand that some events, they cannot be prevented, no matter how well prepared you are. But still, right, was there a way to catch this, to flag this much quicker than it was flagged and then respond to it before she made it to the close proximity where she was in order to, hurt some folks, which she did. And that was the catalyst where we started brainstorming, and this is when the idea of connecting cameras into one AI brain came together, overlaying over real-time active geolocational tracking and all the other pieces that essentially makes Volt what it is today.
Fair enough. So you threw out an awful lot just even in the last 3 or 4 sentences there in terms of the capabilities of Volt. And I want you to hone in on one in particular, and I don't know which one, but You identified a couple areas there, and I'm interested. What's the fundamental limitation that Volt and AI are solving that more traditional approaches simply can't overcome?
Real-time location. And by the way, this is the one that I'm probably the most passionate of, because if you ask, various team members on our team, they might answer this differently. But to me personally, there's something that I heard a very long time ago that makes a lot of sense in my head. It's too much intel is just as bad as not enough intel. Uh, in the When you have to make very costly decisions very quickly, right? If you're overwhelmed by different sources of information, by different types of sources, just think of it as the worst day of sensory overload. In a lot of cases, unless you're very well trained and you do this continuously, that could lead to decision delay because you're trying to process all that information, right? So just having a very smart system that starts throwing images at you saying, hey, this is what's happening, but you don't quite understand how those images fit together in terms of space and time, meaning where has the event begun, how is it progressing, where is it currently, and what is it likely, how is it likely to progress in the next, let's say, 60 to 90 seconds, right? It becomes very prone to human error, right? Now, our thinking was the following. There's a couple of fundamental pieces that a first responder needs immediately in order to understand what to do intuitively. First, the one that's what is it happening? And what is it happening? It needs to be a very crisp thing, like person with a gun, right? Or a car through the gate, or whatever the case may be. In this case, it's person with a gun, right? And then immediately what we need to know is how old is this image, right? Where was it taken at the time of that timestamp? And what is the current status? Meaning, is this image 3 seconds old, right? And the person is still there? Or is this image 30 seconds old and the person is now gone? Well, let's take the second thing that I said. Well, if 30 seconds have passed, how do you know where this person is, right? If you have cameras, theoretically speaking, right, you should be able to tell. But if you have 100 cameras and no way to tell where those cameras are, right, it becomes very difficult to tell, even to people that are looking at these cameras on a daily basis. Because a gray stairwell is a gray stairwell. A parking garage is a parking garage when you have hundreds of them, right? Or if the campus or the facility is very large. So the idea behind taking that information, compressing it into a very digestible, easy to understand format, and then overlaying that on some sort of a system with active real-time geolocation, where you can essentially have, for lack of a better term, a perfect, easy to understand chain of breadcrumbs that says, this is what's happening right here, right? And right now, this is what's happening, right here. And within the next minute, it's probably going to be over here. Using my hands to show it, it becomes very simple. But building that in order for it to be reliable, meaning it works every time the way you want it to work, but also seamlessly without you having to press any buttons and not overloading you with the information, as well as sending that information to the right people that have to do their job simultaneously instead of blocking on each other. That is a very difficult engineering problem to solve.
No doubt. And you are coming across here as an extremely methodical, very logical individual, which I would certainly expect given your background. And as somebody that thinks logically and that clearly put a lot of thought into this as you were building this product, I'm interested. What most surprised you as you were translating your operational security insights and expertise into a viable AI product? Because I've talked to hundreds of founders and not a single one ever seamlessly launches a product without surprises, hiccups, and bumps in the road. So what was most surprising to you as you were building this?
AI is not that smart, first of all. I mean, it's phenomenally smart, but when you compare that to a human brain, and I'm sure I might get a lot of hate for that, but when it comes to crisis, right, and just making decisions like, that cliche thing that people say, if you're on the bridge and you have to, ram your car into an older person or ram your car into a baby, how does AI make that decision? But it's a legitimate question, right? Um, AI is as smart as the people building it, is as smart as people maintaining it, and is as smart as the people selecting the information it feeds it in order for it to learn more and become very good at increasing the probability of making the correct decisions very quickly, right? That was the first learning curve. The second learning curve was, I'm sure every person that has ever started a company learned. It will be a lot harder than you think. It'll take a lot longer than you think to get it to do what you want it to do, and it will cost a lot more. Uh, because to us, it was like, okay, we know exactly what to do. Can you build it? We can absolutely build it. Fantastic. But from knowing what to do, to building it, to making it do a percentage of what we want to do, all of a sudden, that's not a 1 month challenge. It's a year, it's 2 years, it's 3 years, and it's constant, and you're constantly perfecting it because the world around you changes, right? Your risk profiles change. The things that you deal with change, meaning that that product has to change with it. And perfect, if you have this perfectly operational system in mind that you believe you will hit an X amount of months or years, I don't believe that exists. I think you can get as close as possible to perfection before some of the criteria changes, and then you're back to the 80th percentile, and then you're working towards the 100th percentile.
Let's dig into that concept of perfection, but in a slightly nuanced way. I know that one of your passions is AI for the real world and simplifying a lot of these AI tools, making them understandable, making them very usable without training in some cases, and that's pretty bold. So, how are you making an enterprise grade AI security system as intuitive as, say, I think you even said this once, a 3-year-old using an iPhone?
I did say that, guilty, and I say that a lot. Um, if you don't mind me taking a couple of extra, seconds to explain this, but it all started with the idea that I'm not an engineer. And for a very long time, I did not consider myself to be technical. Um, when when the idea started essentially becoming reality, I thought back at my time at Google X, where through various different projects, we never had enough money to hire everybody. And what ended up happening is that you have a handful of extremely talented engineers that can build anything, right? But they have to continuously be prioritized and focused on solving the biggest challenges, meaning the rest of the team has to pull their weight on other less priority technical challenges. I'll give you two examples. One is building the high altitude payloads for the balloons, and second, building the balloons. Building the high altitude payloads became my first job at Loon specifically. What do I know about building high altitude payloads? Absolute zero, right? But somebody had to do it. The containers themselves are not very difficult, right? But the electronics are somewhat difficult. But then what I realized is that a very talented engineer can come up to me and say, hey, listen, we're going to give you all these parts. All you have to do, record it with your phone. That's how you put them together, right? Balloons ended up being the same thing. What do I know about building balloons, which became my second job there, right? Well, again, you go and you watch some people and they say, look, all these materials, you can't mess with it. This is very technical stuff. But this is how you put it together. And this essentially, when we were talking about how will Vault be used, we're lucky enough to have access to a lot of people that have been in this industry for 20 plus years, and they say, look, you have to understand that the same job could be done by different people at the same organization. One is very technical, another person is not technical at all, but they can still perform the job. So the product has to be so intuitive that it virtually does not allow you to make mistakes. And of course, we weren't there when we first launched it, but with every single quarter, it becomes better, better, and closer to that goal. But the idea from it came from exactly that. Can we package all the difficult stuff, right? And essentially allow the, 5% of here's what you do. And if the person looks at the wrong thing or clicks on the wrong thing, the product will actually say, nope, do this, right? And I can't claim I can't claim credit for building that because this is all Dimitri and his team. They're phenomenal at what they do, right? But at least that concept was very well understood by everybody as soon as we started building the product.
Let's go a little deeper on that. So I think you gave me one good example of how you've put some guardrails to simplify the user interface. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of, say, a security manager at a middle market company. How are they going to interact with your system versus a traditional security platform? Because I think you've also got some type of ChatGPT-esque functionality in your portal. Am I correct about that?
We do.
Okay. So with that said, how would a security manager interact with your system versus a more traditional type of platform?
So think about the traditional platform, all right? Once you buy it, you essentially have an army of people that will tell you that you need to go to this university and these training courses, and you have to be certified on this platform, and then you get your silver certification, then you get gold certification, platinum certification. Come on,
So you're not
really?
selling certifications?
Like, are you kidding me? Like, I think it takes less time to learn how to fly a plane, right? And by the way, for those without a sense of humor, I'm joking. Flying a plane is very difficult. Uh, but why is it so difficult? Why is it so necessary? It's literally cameras, right? They're cameras. They're cameras that are looking at stuff. And what you need to know is where does it record? How long does it record for? How do I pull that video? And if it's got any kind of active analytics or AI, right? These are the type of triggers that I want to be notified, and this who needs to know about them between certain time shifts, whatever. That's it, right? You don't need a university for that. The reason that they need universities is because historically a lot of money and development effort has been dumped into functionality of these products, and unfortunately without actually asking which functionality is necessary and which is just bells and whistles that will never be used, right? But very little effort was thrown into the usability of the product. So when you open it up, you're like, oh, there's 27 menus with 2,700 submenus, and every single button tells me something to do that it doesn't allow me to do anything. You need universities and certification courses. Why that was built the way it's built and it hasn't changed, I'm not going to get into that. Everybody can make their own their own conclusions from it. But we wanted to get away from it. Meaning, our system. You asked me a very interesting question. How do we want security managers to interact with our systems? We don't. We don't want them interacting with the system. We want the system to tell them what to do. That's simple, right? Meaning, if the system tells you what to do and it gives you relevant, actionable information, that you don't need to press any more buttons, you just need to go and execute and do the human thing that is absolutely necessary and is not going away anytime soon, if ever, right? Then we did our job. Because think about how many things does a security manager have to manage on a daily basis. Everything from phones to issuing badges to false alarms to customer service to talking to cross-functional members of other teams to facilities to HR to whatever, right? Their day is full and it's very, very busy on a daily basis. So are we asking them, oh, on top of that, now you have to manage this system that is looking at thousands of cameras? No. I think the ideal scenario, and again, we're not at the ideal point yet, but we're much better than most, if not all of them, meaning that take the upfront time cost and sit with them and understand their risk profiles for their buildings, understand their operations, understand their shifts, understand what their SOPs are, right? And then literally set up the system for them that way. And yes, the user can go into the system and still look at the cameras and pull the video and do all that other legacy stuff. Nothing about it is difficult. But the proactive piece of them, we can set that up for you. And then the system now knows what you care about. It is smart enough to flag anomalies that you don't even know you probably care about. And at that point, just let it run in the background and do its job. And then if something goes wrong and something on a black screen pops up front and center saying, this is what's happening, this is where it's happening, this is what you need to do, go and execute. Because guess what? This information is now received by everybody else that you know needs to get this information because we talked about it previously, right? So now everybody can just go and do their job. And after that event is over, be it a violent event, a safety event, a whatever the case may be, Then we do a hot wash, or in other words, I forgot. We call it a hot wash in, in
I
the
don't know
army,
that
but
term.
it's a post-mortem. It's a
Okay.
after action
Oh, like a
report.
debrief.
Debrief. Yeah, correct. So now we look at it, and even if it's a success or a failure, you say what went well, what didn't go well, and how can we improve going forward, right? After the crisis is over. But the idea behind it actively being managed by somebody, I think it's the past, and I think more and more systems need to essentially become a value add that runs in the background and makes professionals' lives easier and more effective than just another tool with tons of information that needs to be managed.
You just laid out a lot of complex pieces here, and there were a number of things that caught my attention. You talked about the information overload that the managers are dealing with. You talked about all the superfluous and, quite frankly, probably unnecessary bells and whistles in traditional systems and the complexity that's there. And I know that one of the things that you're very interested in is using the tools that you're building to reduce safety and security mistakes due to fatigue, inattention, or lack of training, things like that. I'm interested, what are some of the common human failure modes that you see in traditional security operations? Because I think you've started to talk about how your system addresses some of those, but I'm interested in your experience here with respect to where you see the humans failing, because I think there's a through line between that and what you're saying the system that you guys have built does directly, which is takes a lot of the decisions processing out of the hands of the manager and directs them where their attention needs to be. But that said, failure modes.
Well, let's talk about the first one, which was a pretty big one. Let's say that you and I run an organization that has, 250 cameras, which is a very, very low. This is like a high school, right? Um, so you can imagine if, just think about it that I said 250 cameras, but then think about 500, 1,000, 1,500, etc. So 250 cameras. So let's say that our budget allows us to essentially make sure that we have 5 people watching those cameras at any given moment. Well, 5 people, it's not like 5 people are sitting there and watching them. They can't work 24 hours. 5 people means that there's one person watching those cameras 24 hours, because you need 3 people to cover 24 hours. That's 24/7. And then you need 2 other people to cover for no shows, for holidays, for sick days, for whatever the case may be. So even though we have a budget for 5 people, it's only one person watching those cameras for 8 hours. Now, can a person effectively watch 250 cameras on one screen? Absolutely not. Meaning that either you have a lot of screens with, 5, 10, 15, 9, 12, whatever the configuration is, screens at any given moment, or you have one screen that constantly flips through various cameras. In most cases, it's a couple, 2, 3 screens that also constantly flip to hit the 250. So, what are the chances? Let's say this is the perfect human being that will literally stare at those screens and will notice everything that is happening on those small little squares, and they will be able to pick up anything that happens there. What are the chances that they will be able, that when something happens in an area, that's exactly going to be the camera that they're looking at? Slim to none. Now let's say we remove the superhuman that I just mentioned that doesn't exist. And then we go to what does happen with actual humans. They read books, they look at their phones, they talk to other people, they glance, and they're saying, well, if I see something, then great, right? Plus, human factors, attention span, training, motivation. Did you have enough to sleep? Did you fail your exam? Did you get into a fight with your spouse? All of that goes into how motivated or not motivated, how on or off at that particular moment within that particular shift you are. That is just the reality, right? And from you being fantastic to you having a very bad day is just one phone call from whatever, right? And that is one of the biggest failure modes, where previously a lot of these legacy systems, and unfortunately still a lot of the newer systems that come into market, that has been the failure point. Meaning these systems are very much reactive. They're very much created for collection of information, in this case video, for investigative and post-investigative purposes. Investigative, let's find out what happened. Post-investigative, meaning let's process all of this and put the policies and the trainings in place to try and prevent stuff like that happening ever again. Now, imagine that you have all these cameras connected to a very smart brain that now can flag when anytime there's a fight, anytime when somebody hops a fence, anytime when somebody collapses due to a possible medical emergency, anybody that brings a weapon, whatever the case may be. You can still look at those screens for whatever you want, but at least you know that if that screen is not pulled up, if you're not looking at that square, if something happens, it'll pop in front of you, front and center, say, hey, pay attention, there's an issue. So it eliminates a lot of the failures on that end. I have others, by the way, but I'm going to take a breather if you want to ask me some questions.
No, I think that's a perfect example, and the way you led us through the idea of 250 cameras in a school and the amount of fatigue that is going to be heaped upon the individual watching that, and the solution that you're bringing to bear, I think that really brings that home. And it begs another question here on my end. Since you surfaced the example of a school, I know during our pre-interview, you shared a really compelling vision with me. You shared, and I hope it's okay for me to share this, you talked about your vision that if Volt could reduce violence in educational spaces by just 1%, that would be immensely gratifying to you. I went out and I looked. There's something like 130,000 plus K-12 schools and higher ed institutions out there. So a 1% delta on that, or a 1% impact on that amount of educational institutions, that would be huge. So I guess I'm interested in a couple things. Number one, we're talking about violence. So I'm interested, what is your definition of violence? And then I'm also interested in the goal, that 1% goal. How might you measure progress so that you're feeling like you are making an impact?
Well, everything that you said is correct. I'm just going to make one small correction. We're not striving for the 1%. We would love for it to be 100%. What I was merely trying to say is that building a company like that is a 10 plus year marriage. This is 10 plus years of our lives, the people, Dimitri, myself, and other early team members of Volt, right? That will have to make a lot of sacrifices in order to build this. What I'm trying to say is that even if we see a positive outcome of 1% reduction in safety and security events, specifically violence, within the educational space, this is something to be proud of and saying that I did not sacrifice 10 years of my life for nothing, right? Because this deals with kids, and kids are our future. But that's just the reality in any society.
And right? I didn't mean to imply that you were only driving toward 1%.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I know. I just wanted to kind of make that clarification.
Sure. No, I appreciate that.
Let's start from the beginning, meaning how do I classify or define violence? Keep in mind, this is my definition, but anything, be it security or safety or whatever the case may be, that make our students feel unsafe when they go to school. When I went to middle school and high school here in the US, I didn't think about metal detectors. I didn't think about shootings. I didn't think about, active shooter drills. That was not the case. My only worry was that if I decide to skip class, I'm going to get caught by my football coach, who's also the security guy, and he's going to, make me regret it. That was my only fear, right? But now, unfortunately, that is not the case. And be it a shooting, obviously, that's self-explanatory. But also, you would not believe some of the events that we catch, things like bullying, right? When a group of kids locks another kid, in a porta potty or something like that. Things like, we've seen kids collapse in the hallways between classes due to, diabetes and due to seizures and whatever the case may be. Well, yeah, if they collapse and they don't get any help for 45 minutes because everybody else is busy and the hallways are empty, versus they get help within seconds, even if they have that condition and they go to school and they understand if something happens to me, there's this there's this guardian angel, right, that is watching over me that will make sure that I get help. Will the kids still worry about that? Sure, right? But will they at least know that chances are you're going to get help that you need? And that's how I define not just violence, but just the safety aspect overall. I just want to make sure that when kids go to their respective schools, be it elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, whatever the case may be, they feel safe. And more importantly, their parents also feel safe. That is on that side. How do we measure? First of all, I am not that smart to figure out how to run the statistics of how to measure, societal changes and percentages.
I don't know. You built those balloons.
Well, but I put them together. There's a difference in building them and putting them together.
Fair enough.
But what I can tell that between Dimitri and the other engineers that we have, they're absolutely smart enough to do that, right? And even right now, we collect a lot of data. And by the way, when I say that, it's customers, they own their own data with us. We don't sell data, we don't do anything with that. It is their data. But internally, we collect a lot to essentially see how effective our systems are. And this is something that is being checked over and over again on a continuous basis to make sure that our systems continuously improving, right? And I'm sure there's a way, we already are discussing those, and we are collaborating essentially with every single customer that we have, because keep in mind, once a system is onboarded, right, we either have weekly meetings with them or monthly or quarterly. There's constant reviews and QBRs where the customer has the ability to say, this is what's going well, this is what's not going well, and these are the things that your system is not doing that we would like it to do. So there's constant back and forth feedback. But one of that feedbacks is also, how do we measure success? And what does success mean to you specifically at this customer? Because they're not all alike. Some customers really care about, violence because they're in very bad neighborhoods. Other customers really care about, people not paying when they park in their parking garages, right? That is their big deal. But generally speaking, success deals with safety and security of the students. And there's a lot of different metrics that could be tracked that says, hey, historically over the past, 3 years, this is what we've been seeing, both reported internally as well as caught by the system, and this is what we're seeing now, right? And again, not a data scientist. I'm sure there's a million of different holes that somebody can poke into it and says, well, it's not that black and white. Sure. But if we can at least get some positive signals, let's say in 3, 4, 5 years, whenever Volt becomes a household name, where we can say, hey, listen, sure, all you smart brainiacs out there, here's the data. Please tell us if we're wrong or if we really are seeing a decrease in some of these safety and security events, i.e. we can make the conclusion that I think these operations, these facilities, these buildings, these schools are becoming safer. It's a very long answer to your question, and I mumbled a little bit, but hopefully some of that made sense.
No, I think that made a lot of sense, and I appreciate the context. And your answer also made me realize that we've been focused predominantly here on educational institutions within our conversation, but I believe you have clients outside of education as well, correct?
We do.
What's the equivalent value proposition for, I don't know, a manufacturer or an office building or a retail location? Because their risks and incidents are looking a little bit different, I would imagine, than in the educational sector.
Well, for our non-education customers, the reason that they buy Volt is still due to safety and security risks. The reason that we started focusing more and more on education is because safety and security of kids hits much harder than safety and security of employees as grown adults. Unfortunately, I would love for enterprise customers to take that just as seriously as students and staff within K through 12 as well as higher ed facilities take it. But unfortunately, that is not the case. At least that is not the case now, and that's what we have not found that to be the case in the past, 3 years since we started deploying to customers. Because we would pitch an enterprise client and say, hey, listen, this is what we do, this is how we can help you. And we get somebody who is very passionate about the subject because something happened previously, or they came from an organization where they know that this is a serious thing that can really damage a company's reputation, right? and they're all in. They're all in understanding whether you are the correct solution, not the correct solution. And if you are the correct solution, how can they bring it to the table? Maybe it's only one facility instead of all of them first, right? But they're engaged, right? Others, that's not a priority to them. Whatever you want, however you put it, they're like, this is really cool, but I have 25 other things that I believe I would much rather spend our money on. With education, though, that was a very eye-opening moment where within 30 seconds, it just clicks to them. Because again, let's be honest, most people become educators because they care. They really, really care about their students and about making those facilities and those environments as student-friendly as possible. And it clicks. They may not have a project. They may not know anything about the system or this industry in general. They may not have the money, but they are so engaged and they're asking you in some case, and please help me figure out how I can bring this on, at least for one school, at least for a couple of cameras, right? One of the reasons why we do free pilots, right? In most cases, not for all, right? But in most cases, we do free pilots because even if they don't have the budget, but they need to show this to somebody that has the ability to give them some budget for next year, and it's within a school or a university, we will do it. We'll be like, hey, use the system. It's not now. It's not just a concept now, but like put your hands on it, for so to say, right? See how it works. It's just a very different mentality we have found that when you talk to educators, even if they know nothing about it, they immediately understand the benefits and the positive impacts that could happen if they bring a system like that into their schools.
I'd like to return for a moment to some of your experiences working at Google X. And I'm not interested in unpacking specific experiences, but what I'm interested in is working there exposed you to, quite frankly, some of the most ambitious technology development in the world, taking moonshots, doing really big things in a culture where I think they often talk about attempting the impossible. So with that experience in your rearview mirror, what lessons did you bring with you to vault from that deliberately, and what lessons did you leave behind? Because you're building a very different company than the one that you were at.
Um, it was a very humbling moment at the age of 25 to end up at Google X because I thought I was above average. I between my hobbies and my intellect and my abilities to do stuff and everything that I've achieved to that point, I was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good, right? Most rooms that I walk into, like, I'm in the top percentile. And then you get there, and guess what? Oh, you have one degree? They have three, right? And not only two of them are in aerospace engineering from MBA, but one of them is from Harvard, right, as an MBA. And then they have another one, the fourth degree, from like some Juilliard School of Music just because they wanted to learn piano. And you're like, okay, that's the first hit on my chin. Then I was like, oh, you jump out of airplanes? But so do they. But they also build airplanes and helicopters in their garage. So they can actually fly their own contraptions to a drop zone, land, do some jumps, get back to it, and fly home. Right? Oh, you do pretty well in fitness. Oh yeah, they run ultra marathons on top of doing all that stuff. Right? Oh, and on top of that, right, they're building all this cool stuff at Google, and they make it seem like they don't care, right? It's just it's that simple to them. And you immediately sit down and you realize, holy crap, what did I just get myself into? That was Google X. And what I realized is that it's sink or swim, meaning that everybody's super nice. Everybody from the lowest, people that, are interns to all the way to the most senior people that make the best. Everybody's super nice, and everybody will give you the tool and will give you the environment for you to learn if you want to. But guess what? You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to go on Amazon and buy some books and start reading certain subjects. You're going to have to understand that you're going to walk into a room and you're going to be the dumbest person ever for a very long time, right? But if you just learn 15% of what these people know, all of a sudden, your life will change. And now they will find used to, yeah, of course, you're not going to be coding just as well as somebody, that just spent 12 years at MIT learning, or or some other place learning robotics, right? Um, but you will be able to do a job that they need you to do, right? And that will make you an asset to the team, and that will make your project succeed. And if your project succeeds, everybody else involved in this project will succeed. But it's a very humbling experience, and some people did that. They were like, okay, I'm going to be the dumb person of the year for the next 3 years, but I'm okay with that because I am here to learn, right? And other people, they washed out. But they washed out not because people made them wash out. They washed out on their own because they were like, I'm not spending the next, 2, 3 years essentially working 10, 12 hours a day plus studying an extra 6 just to make sure that I don't fail at my job. No, thank you, I'm good. And there's various reasons for that. I was young, I was single, I had zero responsibilities, so to say, right? There's people with families and kids and all that. So I understand that not everybody is built equal. But that mentality where always hire people that are smarter than you stayed with us to this day. Like, I like the fact that I consider myself, let's be honest, technically the dumbest person in my company, right? It is phenomenal, right? But what does that mean? It means that, I can say something and then people might listen to me and they'll be like, okay, cool, all right, we got it. But then they will go and actually build what they know that we want, but they will do it the right way, right? So I'm just a very big believer, like all jokes aside, that if you hire people that are smarter than you, your company will skyrocket. If you're insecure about that and you always need to essentially be the smartest person in the room or the big boss in the room, you're in for a very rough ride. That is just the reality. So that is the mentality that I tried to bring from Google X into this company. Hire people smarter than you, and they will build exactly what needs to be built without having without needing you to do babysitting. The thing that I didn't bring is that, unfortunately, as organizations get bigger and they get older, a lot of bureaucracy comes into play. A lot of politics come into play. A lot of things that, in my opinion, they kill innovation. And I don't think Google X was at that point when I left. I don't think Google was at that point when I left. I love X. I love Google, Alphabet now. I think they're phenomenal companies, and I think they taught me more about how to succeed than anybody ever did. Right. So I will forever be grateful to those companies and those people. Um, but I've also noticed some trends where people that were really willing to do the work and to essentially to do whatever is necessary to learn to make sure that the project and the company succeeds. But also we started getting people that were there just to essentially, there was a saying, it's called rest and vest. Essentially do nothing and make sure you stock vests, right? Because you're typically on a 4-year vesting schedule, right? And nothing kills the morale of high performers more than understanding that because of some, political skills or some bureaucratic skills, uh, those people will essentially will get just promoted just as fast as you will, in some cases even faster. Or they're so adapt to essentially jumping company to company and doing the rest and best that they know the game very well, and they don't accomplish anything, but at the same time they keep growing. And it's this sense of unfairness where we should be judged on performance, right? And the results that we deliver, but some of us are and some of us are not. And it's something, it's part of our 4 core values at Volt. One of them is be direct, meaning that if you see something that you disagree with, doesn't matter if it's an intern and they see something that I do they disagree with. Trust me, I do plenty of things people disagree with, and so does Dimitri. Say something. Your job will never be jeopardized based on your opinions. It just won't, right? You're here to do a job. You're here, if you're part of the team, you're here to make sure you figure out how to work well with that team, right? And then you accomplish, right? That's it. Everything else, focus on delivering results. That is the biggest thing that you need to worry about. So to summarize things is that I don't know if this is just a natural beast of companies getting bigger and the pressure of hiring quickly or whatever the case may be, that, the quality of people that you hire becomes to drop a little bit, But uh, we will try, and I think we've done a great job at this point, keep our company as close as possible to that perfection where people get in because they're driven, because they're smart, because they want to accomplish things, and everything else, how they talk, what they think, none of that really matters. It's all about delivering results. So they never have to feel like they're doing all the work and somebody next to them is doing no work, but at the same time, everybody's getting kudos at the same level, at the same frequency.
I think you just inadvertently answered a question that I was going to ask you about how you build a startup team that's charged with doing the impossible. And I think you really gave me some context around that. So let me pivot and ask you, when you're building something that's, quote, impossible, what is still impossible that you're working on? Because you've clearly made a lot of other strides toward building tech and breathing life into things and making them possible from your starting point all those years ago. So what's still impossible that you're working on?
I don't think anything is impossible, to tell you the truth. It's actually part of my my personal email handle. Still, I think nothing is impossible. I truly don't believe in anything impossible. I think there's a matter of resources and timing, right? Something that we do today was, I mean, you couldn't do this for 150 years ago. It was impossible for them, right? But is it impossible? No, it's not. Timing and resources, right? um, to us, even building the product that we currently have, um, initially it seemed close to impossible. Said we're going to try it. We don't know how it's going to work. Now, obviously, integrating the what you said, the ChatGPT functionality into our product to make sure that people they can just talk to the product and the product will do what they want, um, seemed impossible. Now we have it working. It's still not where we want it to be ultimately, but it's a long journey. But it's working, right? I don't really want to get into our roadmap.
Oh, you don't want to spill everything right now?
No. That's Dimitri. You can do it. Um, but there's a lot of things that even right now when we're sitting and we're thinking about what will both look like in 18 months and 36 months and 5 years, whatever. There's a lot of things that we're like, we're going to do this. And we agree that we're going to do this. But how we're going to do this, we have no clue. We have no clue how we're going to do it. But tell you what, we'll figure it out.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Not in terms of the how, but maybe in terms of how you're thinking about things. And I'll ground this next question. There is a ton of talk about agentic AI right now, right? AI agents. It's a hot topic. We're starting to finally see the emergence of some of the promise here in 2025 in terms of what they could possibly do. I'm interested about how you're thinking about AI agents within the context of physical security and the role that they could play in Volt's future. Can you shed any light on how you're thinking about those?
I mean, to be honest, I'm not. This is more. This goes so beyond my expertise
Mm-hmm.
that even if I try to come up and tell you some elaborate answer right now, what I think is going to happen, I'm 99.9% sure that I will be wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I do spend most of my time thinking about is how do we turn, I believe the best security is the security that you don't see. It just magically works, right? So now when you're going through all these purchasing, be it RFPs or just purchasing processes for systems, the front and center focus is always on, in the systems world, it's always cameras. Like cameras. And if I have $10 and I need to buy cameras and cameras cost $10 and AI costs $10, I'm obviously going to buy cameras, right? Because without cameras, nothing can be done. The problem that I see with that is that cameras, without their ability to be proactive and work in real time, are useless. They're just collecting a bunch of information that most of that information goes unused and nobody ever watches it again. Is there a way to marry that? Meaning that is there a way where people will understand that having more cameras and zero AI is actually useless, but having less cameras, but a very smart system and those cameras placed correctly, right, will all of a sudden give you the ability to offload 80% of all the manual processes that you currently do with all your people managing all your security systems. So sorry I couldn't, answer the question that you asked. I just wanted to say this, that's what I spend most of my time thinking about. It's how do we get to that point? Well, people will finally understand that cameras by themselves and people with butts in seats looking at monitors does not improve their security. It just doesn't. Or if it does, it's so incremental that it's unnoticeable.
Sure. Well, I think you did answer the question, actually. I think you talked about the best security is that which is invisible. And I think that runs directly to the heart of a lot of missions of tech-powered companies, in that the tech should be invisible. It should be seamless, which is one of the things that we've talked about here before in our discussion today, which is making it as easy as possible for a 3-year-old child to operate, right? It's the same premise. So I think you did answer that question, so thank you.
You're welcome, I guess.
No. Look, the agentic piece of it, that's technical wizardry as opposed to the philosophy that's overlaying it, which I think you very succinctly described there. So speaking of philosophy, I'm also interested in the idea of purpose. You talked about the core values that power your organization earlier, and I know that you've got a passion for this. And so my question to you is, as an entrepreneur that's pursuing a passion, that has a purpose, that's using tech to make the world a better place, but also somebody that has to raise capital to deliver returns, how do you balance that mission-driven purpose with the commercial imperative? Are they in tension and conflict? Are they in alignment? What's that look like from your standpoint?
You find the right investors. And again, we are lucky enough to have some amazing advisors and amazing friends. Most of them have run companies and sold companies, became investors, introduced us to other investors. Great investors know other great investors. We've said no to money that we believe that, it's not going to be right for us, for sure. But so far, we've surrounded ourselves by investors that, by the way, they're investors. Their job is not to make us happy or be friends with us. There's a ton of times where we were not doing well. It's a startup where they would, in a very polite and very diplomatic way, still eat us alive on those calls. That's their job, right? It's okay. It's nothing personal, right? But at least if they're passionate about the things that you're passionate about, and if they believe, or at least they believe that there's a chance of you succeeding in that because they're still passionate through it, they will have your back, even when things go bad. So when we make commercial decisions and when we make decisions that deal with what the product is going to look like, or who are we going to go after in terms of sales and marketing, and how we're going to price our product, which things are we going to prioritize that we believe will increase the demand and the stickiness of our product, we never have to really worry about what will the investors say, because we surrounded ourselves with such good investors that they understand that we know more about the space than they do. They know investments. They know building companies. They know great people. They're phenomenal at that stuff. But they trust us to make a decision to make sure that the company keeps growing, right? And that eventually they will see the returns on their money and their time that they've put into us. So I guess that's a very long way of saying that at this point, we're very lucky to have surrounded our cap table essentially with the right people.
So our time is starting to draw very short here. So I want to ask you one or two final questions. Since we're talking about investors, we're talking about the organization, if you project 5 years ahead, down the road for Volt, what does success look like for you?
We are the market leader in our industry in education in the U.S., both K through 12, public and private, as well as higher ed, colleges and universities, etc.
Mm-hmm. And how do you measure that market leader status? What's most meaningful?
If you go into a school and it's one of three types of people, they either have Volt, they either are about to get Volt, or they know about Volt and they decided to get something else, we're a market leader.
I love it. All things Volt. Wonderful.
That's it.
That's great. Let me ask you one other question here, Igor. I know that you engage in, shall we call them, a lot of high-risk activities outside of the office, right? For you, number one, what's your favorite high-risk activity?
Skydiving.
Skydiving. Okay. And I believe you mentioned in our prep call when we were talking about that, I think I asked you, what do your investors say about those high-risk activities? And you said to me something along the lines of,
They're not too happy about it, the ones that know about it. But they know that if I don't do that, that is the best way for me to stay sane. So I think they've accepted that unwillingly.
and that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. Are those activities necessary for somebody that is constantly pushing the bleeding edge to stay sane? Do you need to have those types of outlets?
I think if you're not happy in your personal life, you'll never be happy at work. And if you can't build a great personal life, you'll never be able to build a great company. That's my personal belief. People can argue with me till they're blue in the face, but I'm going to stick to my guts. And here's why. Building a company, and again, these are not my words. I believe Sam Altman said that in one of his talks, where every smart entrepreneur understands that it's going to be difficult and there's going to be ups and downs. What they don't understand is how frequent those ups and downs will be, how high the ups will be, how low the downs will be, and the unpredictable nature of when they come. And they always come at the most inconvenient times. So you're essentially being beaten up physically and mentally for years. For years, right? You're constantly under constant stress, and you have to put on a smile, a positive attitude, wake up in the morning, and get in the Shark Tank again and again and again and again, and things are going to fail, and things are not going to work, and investors are going to be pissed off at you, and your family is going to be pissed at you, and you're going to lose friends, and you're going to lose family, and you're going to lose so many different things, right? And you have to continue, keep going, and keep going. Well, if you just do that and you don't have a release, and the release can be different. Some people play chess, some people golf, some people, grow tomatoes, other people go to music shows. My releases are skydiving, scuba diving, snowmobiling, motorcycling, pretty much everything that deals with adrenaline. That is what I love to do, because I know that if I do one jump, just one, right? I drive back with a big smile. If cars cut me off, I don't even care, right? I'm listening to music, I'm happy, right? I just threw myself out of an airplane, gravity's not going away, it didn't kill me, I'm happy.
I can't think of a better place to end our discussion today than on you being happy. So thank you for sharing all that, especially that last bit of insight. I think that that's really valuable for anybody that's not just founding a company, but leading a company. And there are not a lot of people out there that understand the pressures of leading an organization, let alone founding and growing it. So I appreciate you giving us some insight into that and sharing those experiences with us here today.
It was my pleasure.
So, all right. For our listeners that want to learn more about you, maybe they want to take you skydiving, maybe they just want to get in touch, they want to, purchase some Volt equipment and AI, what's the best way for them to do that?
Volt.ai is the best. And then feel free to just contact me directly on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. All right, Igor, this was a true pleasure. I would love to have you back once you've not only hit but massively exceeded that 1% target that we talked about earlier. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours. It was a pleasure.
And for all of our listeners out there, thank you for your time, and thank you for tuning in to AI for the C-Suite, where we're committed to helping middle market leaders thrive during the exponential age. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on all the socials, and visit our site, aiforthec-suite.com. Join us next time as we continue to unlock the potential of AI for your organization. And until then, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Thanks, everybody.